Hi, everybody. Hope your preparation for the term one exam is going great. Since day after tomorrow is the maths exam, I know that you will be looking for a place where you can have a summary of all the concepts together. So I thought, let me make this video where I can summarize the important formulae and concepts from each chapter at one place. All right. Okay, let's get started. The first thing, real numbers, fundamental theorem of arithmetic. The fundamental theorem of arithmetic states that any composite number can be prime factorized. What do you mean by composite number? What do you mean by prime number? The smallest natural number is 1. 1 is not prime. It is not composite. It's neither prime nor composite. The smallest prime number, which is also the only even prime number, is 2. 2 is the smallest prime number. What are prime numbers? Numbers which have only two factors, that is 1 and the number itself. These are the only factors of a prime number. But a composite number would have minimum 3 factors. 1, the number itself, and another prime factor. Smallest composite number possible is 4. This is the smallest composite number. It has 3 factors, 1, 2, and the number itself, which is 4. Okay? And you need to know how to find HCF and LCM of any two numbers. The highest common factor would be product of the smallest power or the least power of each common prime factor only. Only the common prime factors you take, and you take the smallest power. The LCM is the product of the greatest power of each and every prime factor. Everything has to be taken involved in the numbers. All right. And if you have two positive integers, that means you're having two natural numbers, A and B. The HCF of these two numbers multiplied by the LCM of the two numbers would be the product of the two numbers. This is also an important thing. Always remember, a factor is a number which divides something else. A multiple is a number which can be divided. All right. So these words are a little important. You also need to understand the meaning of co-prime numbers in this context. What are co-prime numbers? Co-prime numbers are two natural numbers whose highest common factor is 1. The highest common factor of two co-prime numbers is 1. For example, you could have numbers like 4 and 9. You could have numbers like 12 and 13. Okay, so these are all co-prime numbers because their highest common factor is 1. Both of them don't have to be prime here. It just means the highest common factor of both is 1. And what will be the LCM of co-prime numbers? The LCM of co-prime numbers would be just the product of the two numbers. So if you wanted to find LCM of 4 and 9, just 4 into 9. LCM of 12 and 13, just 12 into 13. This is the concept behind the fundamental theorem of arithmetic. The next thing is about decimal representation of rational numbers, which comes in the NCERT in exercise 1.4. Decimal expansion of every rational number is either terminating or it is non-terminating repeating. Very important point. Either the decimal expansion terminates. So you have 1.2, 1.3333. That's it. You're stopping there. So it terminates. This could be a rational number. Even numbers which are of this type, 1.3010101 ... I'm putting the dots here, which means that pattern keeps repeating. That 0, 1 pattern is repeating over here. Then it is called a non-terminating, but it repeats. So hence it is a rational number. Irrational number would be non-terminating, non-repeating. It is not terminating and there's no particular string of numbers which keeps repeating. So that would be an irrational number. Irrational numbers could be surds like root of a prime number, root 2, root 3, root 5. All these are irrational numbers. Even pi and all these. These are all called irrational numbers. And the rational numbers, remember, are numbers of this type, either terminating or non-terminating but repeating. How do you know which type of rational number you have when it is given in P by Q form? What you need to do is, first you need to reduce P by Q. Cancel all common factors from P by Q. Okay? Make P and Q co-prime numbers so that it becomes A by B, where A and B does not have any common factor. Very important step. Cancel common factors. After you do that, just check this B. in case B only has prime factors as 2 or 5 in its prime factorization, either 2 alone or 5 alone, or both 2 and 5 are there, no problem. But only 2 and 5 should be there. So any power of 2, any power of 5 does not matter. As long as only 2 or 5 is there, that means that the prime factorization of B is in this form, 2 to the power n, 5 to the power m, where n and m are non-negative integers or they are whole numbers. And hence, this type of number would have terminating expansion. Okay, that is important. It has a terminating decimal expansion. On the other hand, in case this was there was any other prime factor, like you had 3, for example, or you had 7, or you had 11 coming in the prime factorization, in that case, it would be a non-terminating but repeating. It is still rational number. If it has some other prime factor in the denominator, it's still a rational number, but it is not terminating kind. Okay. And how do you find out after how many decimal places does this terminate? If you want to find out after how many decimal places, okay, does this number terminate? So if you want to do that, you just check the greater number out of n or m. So remember what we have done here. We have cancelled out all the common factors. After that, we prime factorize denominator. If only 2 or 5, or only 2, only 5, these come as the prime factors in the denominator, that means it terminates. You want to find out after how many places it terminates? Check which is the greater number out of the powers. Suppose you had 2 cube into 5 square. It terminates after 3 decimal places. If you had 2 square into 5 to the power 7, it terminates after 7 decimal places. Okay, that's all. The next thing, polynomials chapter. Zeros of polynomial. There's not much on zeros of polynomial in your 10th grade textbook. This actually came from the 9th grade textbook. But it's so important, very important in the exam, the concept of zeros and factors. Lot of questions where you have to find a missing value of some k or a in the polynomial comes based on this. What is the meaning of zero of a polynomial? Zero of a polynomial is basically a value which you can put for x, where when you substitute instead of x, wherever x comes in the polynomial, instead of x, you're substituting a, you're going to get p of a is equal to 0. So here what happens is a is also called a root of this equation, p of x is equal to 0. So if you're having x minus 3 as a polynomial, you want to find out what is the 0 of this polynomial. Okay, if you want to find out what is the 0 of this polynomial, you just put x minus 3 equals 0, you get x is equal to 3. So this x is equal to 3 is a 0 of this polynomial. Okay, you can also say x minus 3 is a factor. X minus 3 is a factor. X is equal to 3 is a 0. You substitute 3, you're getting 0 as the answer over here. All right. And another thing that I want you to keep in mind over here is that if you are given a 0 of the polynomial and you want to find out some unknown value in the polynomial, suppose you're having kx square plus 3x minus 2. This is a given polynomial and you're given that minus 1 is a 0. You want to find the value of k. In this case, you just have to substitute minus 1 over here wherever x is coming. So you get k into minus 1 square plus 3 into minus 1 minus 2, right? You're substituting whatever is given as a 0 wherever x is coming. Once you do this, equate this to 0, then you will get over here k minus 3 minus 2 is 0 or k is equal to 5. So this type of question where you to find an unknown value when a 0 is given is quite important. When a 0 is given, substitute that value wherever x comes in the polynomial, equate the complete expression to 0. This answer you get as 5 over here in this case for the value of k. All right. Next thing in polynomials, geometrical meaning of zeros of a polynomial. If you are having a polynomial p of x of degree n, it means that it intersects the x-axis at maximum endpoints. So polynomial p of x of degree n has at most n zeros. See, only in the case of linear polynomial, right? If you're having a linear polynomial, or if you have cubic polynomial, or if you are having 5th degree polynomial, that means wherever the degree is odd, remember there should be minimum 1 0 for sure. Minimum 1 0 will be there for sure in all of these cases. What is the maximum number of zeros in each of the cases? For a linear, maximum number of zero will be 1. For cubic, maximum number of zeros will be 3. For fifth degree, maximum number of zeros will be 5. Okay. So if you're looking at a linear, that means it will be like this. Always there is exactly 1 0. Minimum 1 0 possible, maximum 1 0 means always 1 0 is there. For cubic, you could have maybe like this. So you can see over here, there are 2 zeros, right? Or it is also possible that you have something this way, 1, 2, 3 zeros. Or you may have only 1 0. That is also possible, something like that. Okay. Similarly, for the fifth degree, which is all odd degrees. What if you have even degree polynomial? For example, a quadratic polynomial. You could have minimum no zeros, minimum 0 zeros. That means no point of intersection with the x-axis. That is possible for an even degree polynomial. For example, in the case of quadratic, the shape of a quadratic polynomial is always a parabola. So when you're having a parabola, maybe you could have no zeros like this. See, it's not intersecting x-axis at all. Or you could have only 1 0, or you might have 2 zeros, maximum 2 zeros. Maximum number of zeros is whatever is the degree. So this point is very important. Degree n means it has at most n zeros. Okay. All right. Next thing, relationship between zeros and coefficients, particularly for a quadratic polynomial. This comes in NCERT exercise 2.2. General form of a quadratic polynomial is what? Ax square plus bx plus c. A should not be equal to 0. If a was equal to 0, then this will not become a quadratic polynomial. So x square coefficient should not be 0. But the x coefficient or the constant term could be 0. Now, in this case, if we say that the two zeros are alpha and beta, if the two zeros are alpha and beta, sum of the zeros, which is alpha plus beta, will be minus b by a. Alpha plus beta will be minus b by a, which is negative of the coefficient of x divided by coefficient of x square. And product of zeros, which is alpha beta, will be c by a, constant divided by coefficient of x. Okay. Now, there are two important types of questions over here. One is based on, given that the zeros are reciprocal of each other. Zeros are reciprocal of each other. Okay. If you have zeros which are reciprocal of each other, that means one zero is alpha, the other zero will be 1 by alpha. In this case, the product of zeros, which is alpha into 1 by alpha, will be equal to 1. So whenever you get questions where zeros are reciprocal of each other, you use product is equal to 1, which means c by a is equal to 1. Use this logic. This will be helpful in finding out some missing values of constants in the question as well. In case you're having zeros are negative of each other, if you have negative of each other, that means if one zero is alpha, the other zero will be minus alpha. In this case, you can say that the sum of zeros is equal to 0. Sum of zeros equal to 0 means what? Minus b by a will be equal to 0, or simply you get b value must be 0. The x coefficient has got to be 0 in case the zeros are negative of each other. Okay. So remembering these 2 points can help you with certain questions. Also, I would like you to remember this particular very common type of question. If you get 1 by alpha plus 1 by beta, remember that 1 by alpha plus 1 by beta is the same as alpha plus beta by alpha beta, which is same as minus b by a divided by c by a, or minus b by c. Okay. If you are getting this expression, the value would be same as negative of x coefficient divided by constant. This is also quite important. Form of any quadratic polynomial will be what type? It is always x square minus sum of zeros into x plus product of zeros. Okay. I want you to remember this. Always any quadratic polynomial will be of this form. And this is not the only polynomial which will have zeros as alpha and beta. There'll be infinite polynomials which has the same zeros, because I can multiply this with any constant. This multiplied by any constant, each and every term multiplied by any constant will have the same zeros only. That's why this k has been put outside. Okay, so be careful about that. All right. Next one, linear equations, NCERT exercise 3.2. Now, what are the three types of solutions of pair of linear equations? So understanding graphs, very important, especially for case study type questions. And a lot of questions are coming where diagrams are important. You have figures there. So if you are having two intersecting lines, the moment you see two intersecting lines, the solution will be the point of intersection. X and Y coordinates of the point of intersection of these two intersecting lines will be the solution. So when you have intersecting lines, there is exactly one unique solution. It is a consistent system because you're getting solutions. It is independent system because the equations are independent of each other. They're not connected with each other. Okay. Now, if you have parallel lines, you can see that there's no common X or Y coordinate. So there'll be no solution for parallel lines. This is inconsistent. Inconsistent means you're not getting a solution. So this is inconsistent. Infinitely many solutions happens when you're having two lines which are both lying on the same place. The position is exactly same, which means all points are matching. So that means they will have infinitely many solutions. And when you have infinitely many solutions, remember it's called a consistent system. You get at least one solution. It is called consistent. So these two cases, one solution and infinitely many solutions, both these cases are consistent. This is also called a dependent system because both the values are dependent on each other, one and the same equation. So it's completely dependent on each other. Okay. And you need to remember the conditions. It's so important, this particular type of question, which is based on the conditions. Unique solution means consistent and independent, as we discussed earlier. The condition is what? A1 by A2, ratio of X coefficients, is not equal to ratio of Y coefficients. A1 by A2 not equal to B1 by B2. Values of constant does not matter here. A1 by A2 not equal to, the symbol not equal to is important, B1 by B2. No solution, inconsistent and independent. That means that A1 by A2 is equal to B1 by B2, but these values are not equal to C1 by C2. Okay. Infinite number of solutions, consistent and dependent. A1 by A2 equals B1 by B2. It is equal to C1 by C2. All the three ratios are one and the same. Now, one thing which I want you to remember over here in this condition particularly is sometimes you get questions like this. Check for what value of k will 3x plus ky equals 6 and 6x plus let's say 10y is equal to 10 have infinitely many solutions. So they may ask you, check what is the value of k for which infinitely many solutions are there. Now, many of you, what you will do 3 by 6 must be equal to k by 10. You will say k's value must be 5 when you're calculating. But one thing you're going to miss out over here, you see that 3 by 6 should be equal to k by 10. Yes, but also the ratio of constants must be the same, no? So 6 by 10 also must be the same. But you're going to get 6 by 10 as 3 by 5. It's not the same as k by 10. It is not the same as 3 by 6. Then how can this have infinitely many solutions? It's not going to have infinitely many solutions. It's in fact no solution. Parallel lines these will be, because, or it might also be the case that it is unique solution, because here these are not equal. So what you need to do over here is be careful with the complete condition. You will definitely have an option over here for this question which says no value of k is there which exists. No value of k exists would be the answer for this one. Because whatever you put for k, this 3 by 6 is never going to become equal to 6 by 10. So be careful about this type of question. Please learn these conditions properly. Okay. Next, coordinate geometry. In coordinate geometry, we first learn the distance formula. The distance formula says that the distance between 2 points is just the square root of difference in x coordinates. I like writing this as delta x. Here, when I say delta x, I'm not concerned with whether the difference between the coordinates is positive or negative. Just the magnitude matters. So delta x square plus delta y square. Okay, if you want, you can remember this way. If it's confusing, stick to this. Root of x2 minus x1 the whole square plus y2 minus y1 the whole square. Now, what is x2 minus x1? X2 minus x1 is this horizontal distance between the 2 points. And what is y2 minus y1? It is this vertical distance between the 2 points. Okay. Now, once you find this, we are basically using Pythagoras theorem over here. We are using Pythagoras theorem to find the distance by doing root of both the other sides squares. That means root of sum of squares of other two sides. Okay, so you're getting root of x2 minus x1 is one side of the triangle, that's square, plus y2 minus y1 square. This way we get the hypotenuse, which gives us a distance between the 2 points. Remember this particular logic. So knowing Pythagoras theorem, knowing the Pythagorean triplets can sometimes go a long way in helping you with distance formula based questions. Okay. And I also advise all of you to keep a scale with you, keep a pencil with you, because what happens is in the exam, I think if you're permitted to a stationary, and in case a grid is given perfectly, that means the scale is proper. You're getting like 1, 2, 3, and over here also 1, 2, 3. Just observe this carefully. If this is proper, using your scale also, you can make approximate measurements and eliminate between options and get to the right answer. Okay. The next thing, distance between any point and the origin. Well, origin is 0, 0, right? So the distance will be directly square root of x square plus y square. Whatever is the coordinates of this point P, take square root of x square plus y square and you will directly get the distance. Under distance formula, there is a very important question which I want you all to keep in mind. The question where you're asked about point which is equidistant from 2 points. So if you're having 2 points A and B, and you want to find out coordinates of a point which is at equal distance from these 2 points. Remember, any point which is there on the perpendicular bisector, any point which is there on the perpendicular bisector will be at the same distance from A and B. It will be at equal distance from A and B. Any point which is there on the perpendicular bisector will be at equal distances from A and B. So I can have a point over here, let's call it x comma y. This point will be at equal distance from A and B if it is lying on the perpendicular bisector. Then PA is equal to PB. This is the condition that you will use to find any relation between x and y. Important questions which comes based on this is, find the point on the x-axis which is equidistant from A and B. Find the point which is on y-axis which is equidistant from A and B. So if it's a point on x-axis which is equidistant, then you will put the point as x comma 0. If it is a point of the y-axis which is equidistant, you find, you'll put the point as 0 comma y. These things you need to remember. Okay. Section formula, very important. Okay, exercise 7.2. Section formula is a formula which helps you in finding out if you are having two coordinates A and B, where the coordinates are x1, y1 and x2, y2. You want to find out the coordinates of a third point P, which is dividing this line in the ratio m1 is to m2. You want to find the coordinates of this point P. It is dividing in this ratio m1, m2. In that case, the coordinate, in that case, the section formula is very important. Okay, the section formula gives you a method of finding the coordinates of this point P, which let's say it is x and y. X coordinate, how do you get? Look at the pattern. M1 into x2. That means this will have x2, y2 as coordinates. This one has x1, y1 as coordinates. So it will be m1 into x2 plus m2 into x1 divided by m1 plus m2. Then you have m1 into y2 plus m2 into y1, the opposite, divided by m1 plus m2. Okay. This is the formula you use to find the coordinates of the point of internal division. Now, suppose you want to find out the ratio itself. You don't want to find the coordinates of the point of internal division. You want to find the ratio. In that case, what formula you will use? You will change m1 is to m2 to k is to 1. So when you want to find the ratio, depending on which coordinate you know, if you know the x coordinate of the point of internal division, suppose it's given the point is on the x-axis. Okay, then you will know the y coordinate is 0. If it is given the point is on the y-axis, you will know x coordinate is 0. So x coordinate, if you know, then you will say that x is equal to kx2 plus x1 divided by k plus 1. Rearrange this, you will get the value of k. All right, that is the way you can find out the ratio if you know the x coordinate of the point of internal division. If you know the y coordinate of the point of internal division, so suppose we are saying that we want to find out in which ratio x-axis is intersecting this. On x-axis, y coordinate is 0. So that means you know y coordinate. You could put that y coordinate is equal to k y2 plus y1 divided by k plus 1. And then you can solve this equation. You solve this, find the value of K. That value of K will be the ratio which you need. Okay. So this is the way that you can solve questions based on section formula over here this way. All right. And one more tip I have to give you. Suppose the figure is given to you, and again, the figure is following a proper scale, and you are given 2 points, let's say A and B over here. And let's say some point is there, okay? And you want to find out in what ratio it is dividing this line. You want to find out P is dividing AB in what ratio. What you do is roughly, take this measurement and try drawing equal measurements, parts like that. So when I do this, I think it becomes quite clear that P is dividing approximately in the ratio 1:2. So if the figure was given properly to scale, looking at the figure only, you can guess that, okay, P is dividing AB in the ratio 1:2. All right. And in case you are asked to find out the coordinates of the point of internal division, suppose the ratio is given as 2:3, and you want to find the coordinates of the point of internal division. Again, this is what I'm telling. If you can use your graph, and if you know how to draw and mark carefully, you can use this method. In this case, we know how to divide this into 5 parts. To divide into 5 parts, how many lines I need? I need 4 lines. So roughly 1, 2, 3, 4. I can divide roughly into 5 parts like this. 2:3 ratio means this is the point which divides in the ratio 2:3. So here also I can sort of guess what will be the X coordinate, what will be the Y coordinate like this. Okay. This kind of methods you can use if you feel confident enough. Otherwise, stick to the formula. Midpoint formula. Midpoint formula says that the X coordinate of the midpoint of a line is x1 plus x2 by 2. Add the X coordinates, divide by 2. That is the X coordinate of the midpoint. Y coordinate of the midpoint, add Y coordinates, divide by 2. You will get the Y coordinate of the midpoint. Okay. Important application of midpoint formula. This one. For any parallelogram, if you want to find a missing vertex, then remember the midpoint of diagonal AD will be the same as midpoint of diagonal BC. So X coordinate of diagonal, midpoint of diagonal AD, same as X coordinate of midpoint of diagonal BC. You can use that equation. Even Y coordinate of midpoint of diagonal AD will be equal to Y coordinate of midpoint of diagonal BC. Okay. Centroid of triangle and its coordinates. Very important. What is the meaning of centroid? Meaning of centroid is meeting point of medians. Median is a line which bisects a base. So meeting point of all the medians will be centroid. This point is called the centroid. The centroid has X coordinate as sum of X coordinates of all the 3 vertices divided by 3. Y coordinate will be sum of Y coordinates of all the 3 vertices divided by 3. All right. Triangles chapter, basic proportionality theorem, which comes in NCERT exercise 6.1. What this says is, if you have a line which is parallel to one side of a triangle. So let's say ABC you're having a line which is parallel to this side. So D and E to intersect the other 2 sides in distinct points. It's given that it is parallel. Other 2 sides are divided in the same ratio. What does this mean? It means that AD by DB will be equal to AE by EC. Please remember, when we are using BPT, we are only looking at these 2 sides where the parallel line is intersecting. We are not going to look at DE and BC itself. We are not going to get directly a relation between DE and BC over here. No. You are going to have AD by DB equals AE by EC. Or you could say AD by AB is equal to AE by AC. Or you can say DB by AB is equal to EC by AC. All these combinations are possible. And suppose any one of these was true, then by converse, we can say that definitely then the line should have been parallel if you got any one of these as true. Okay. So remember this for BPT theorem. Similarity of triangles. When do you say that 2 triangles or any 2 polygons are similar? Any polygons are similar if their corresponding angles are equal. Corresponding angles should be exactly same measurement, and corresponding sides must be in the same ratio. If you look at this figure, you can say that, all right, the corresponding angles, if you look at the way it is described, you have U, VW, if I'm saying U, VW, this will be similar to, now U is equal to what? X. So I'll put X first. V is equal to Y. So Y, and then W is equal to Z. So this would be the similarity order over here. Okay. And if you notice, the sides in between are having the same ratio. They are in the same proportion. It means that this one, UV by XY, is equal to UW by XZ. That is equal to VW by YZ. If you can verify this by looking at the values given in the figure. What are the conditions of similarity? How can you prove similarity of two triangles? All the sides must be in same ratio, SSS, that is one condition. Okay, when you're checking for similarity using SSS, you look for the smallest side, 8 and 12. You have 12 by 8 is the same as, this will be 3 by 2. Yeah. And then you look for the medium side. The medium side is this one, 10 and 15. So 15 by 10 is also 3 by 2. Look at 18 by 12. 18 by 12 also 3 by 2. So since the ratio of all the sides is same, we say by SSS similarity, these are similar. Okay. Then you are having SAS similarity. So if you look over here, here we are using SAS similarity. There are angles which are equal. A is equal to X, and you're having sides which are in the same ratio. Again, look for the smaller side. So over here, the smaller side over here is 15. The smaller side over here is 10. 15 by 10 is 3 by 2. Here the smaller side is 21. Here it is 14. Check what is 21 by 14. It is again 3 by 2. Okay. So look always for which are the corresponding sides and which are the corresponding angles properly. You would be definitely able to write the correct order of similarity for these cases also accordingly. Try doing that. This one, I've already given you the order of similarity. Okay, here it is easy because you just have to follow the angles. Even if only two angles were given as equal, by AA similarity, you can say that these two triangles are similar, right? Next thing is about areas of similar triangles. Very, very important. Any two similar figures, the ratio of areas is equal to ratio of square of the corresponding sides, or square of ratio of corresponding sides. Both way telling it is correct. One thing I want you all to remember, ratio of sides is the same as ratio of perimeters. Remember this. It is also same as ratio of angle bisectors. Same as ratio of medians, same as ratio of altitudes. All these ratios for two similar triangles. When you have two similar triangles, ratios of all these corresponding measurements will be the same. It will be fixed. What does this mean? It means that ratio of areas of two similar triangles will be square of ratio of sides, or square of ratio of perimeters, or square of ratio of angle bisectors, square of ratio of medians, or square of ratio of altitudes. Please remember this. Next, Pythagoras theorem. Pythagoras theorem is something that you have all been very used to. Square of hypotenuse is equal to sum of squares of the other two sides. Okay, you know this. And remember few Pythagorean triplets over here which can help you with your calculations. 3, 4, 5 is a Pythagorean triplet. 6, 8, 10 is another Pythagorean triplet. Then you have 5, 12 and 13. Okay. You will have 8, 15 and 17. Right. And then let's see, you have 5, 12, 13, 7, 24, 25. All these are important Pythagorean triplets, which if you remember can help you in the exam, because this means 3 square plus 4 square is 5 square. 6 square plus 8 square is 10 square. 5 square plus 12 square is 13 square. 8 square plus 15 square is 17 square. 7 square plus 24 square is 25 square. Okay. Remember this. Also, what I want you to remember with respect to this triangle, when you get a triangle ABC of this sort, okay, and if you're having a perpendicular, so this ABC is right angled at B, and you're having a BD, altitude, which is dropped to the base, I want you to remember certain things. First of all, triangle ABC will be similar to triangle ADB by AA similarity. A is equal to A, B which is 90 is equal to D which is 90. It is also similar to, in this small triangle and this second triangle, C will be same. So C is equal to C, and the right angle which is B will be equal to D over here. So you're left with letter B. By using ratio of corresponding sides, you can write various results. But there are few important results which you're going to get out of this, which will help you a lot in certain questions. One is that AB square, this AB square. So when you're taking these two triangles are similar, You get AB square is equal to AD into AC. Please remember this. AB square will be AD into AC. Very helpful. Another one, BC square, BC square. Okay. So here I'm going to use similarity of this first and last triangles. BC square we are going to get as equal to CD, this part, CD, okay, into the complete hypotenuse, AC. Again, this is important. Another one, a BD square, this perpendicular which has been dropped, the square of that will be equal to AD into DC. All right. These three results which you can get in this particular figure where you have a perpendicular which is dropped to the hypotenuse in a right angle triangle. This will help you a lot with certain questions. Okay, next, trigonometry. In trigonometry, you need to remember the definitions of all the trigonometric ratios. It would be useful if you can remember this. So, ka, toa. Okay, if you are having an angle theta, the angle which is, it is going to be opposite to the opposite side, or the side which is opposite to the angle theta is called opposite side. The sides which are forming the angle will be adjacent side and hypotenuse. Hypotenuse you can recognize, it is opposite the 90 degrees, and the other two sides will be opposite and adjacent side. Okay. Now, what are these ratios? You have sine of theta is equal to opposite by hypotenuse. So that is why this so helps you. Sine of the angle is opposite by hypotenuse. So opposite is this side and hypotenuse is this. This is adjacent. Cos of theta is adjacent divided by hypotenuse. Tan of theta is equal to opposite by adjacent. So that is TOA. Okay. What are the reciprocal ratios? Now, the reciprocal ratios are, you have cosec, you have sec, and you have cot. What is the third letter of cosec? Third letter of cosec is S. Cosec is reciprocal of sine. S for sine. Sec, third letter is C. C stands for cos. Sec is reciprocal of cos. Cot, third letter is T. T stands for tan. Cot is reciprocal of tan. So you get 1 by sine theta, 1 by cos theta, and 1 by tan theta over here. All right. These are the values of these reciprocal ratios. All right. From this, it's quite easy to get the definitions for these also, cosec, sec, and cot. Cosec will be what? Cosec will be hypotenuse by opposite because it's reciprocal of sine. Sec will be reciprocal of cos. Cos means ka, A by H. So take reciprocal of that, H by A. Cot, third letter is T. Take reciprocal of that, A by O. That will be the cot definition. Okay. Next, trigonometric ratios of specific angles. Okay. What are some trigonometric ratios of very specific angles over here? Now, I think all of you have already seen the table. You might have already learned some methods to learn the table also. And many of you might be trying to write the table and then find out the values. I just want to discuss a little different method over here in case you're not used to this already. I would suggest, remember these two triangles. What triangle is this? This is an isosceles right-angled triangle. Now, in this isosceles right-angled triangle, you're having a 90 degrees here. You have a 45 degrees here, 45 degrees here. Of course, because it is isosceles, no? So the remaining two angles, sum is 90, they should be equal, they should be 45. I will take these sides as 1 and I'll take this hypotenuse as root 2. So here in this case, opposite adjacent hypotenuse. I am taking opposite adjacent hypotenuse as 1, 1, root 2 with respect to this 45. Okay, opposite is 1, adjacent is 1, hypotenuse is root 2. Remember this, for 45 degrees, I am going to use this isosceles right angle triangle, two sides which are equal 1 and 1. Obviously, hypotenuse will be root of 1 square plus 1 square, root 2 by Pythagoras theorem. After that, I am going to get 1, 1, root 2 as opposite adjacent hypotenuse. Okay, this is what I have. I can use this to find any ratio of 45 now. You want cot 45? No problem. Cot 45 is what? Adjacent by opposite, 1 by 1. You want to find cosec of 45? No problem. Cosec means hypotenuse by opposite, root 2 by 1, which is root 2. So you can use this triangle to find out the measurement of any ratio if you know the definitions properly. Okay. Similarly, for 30 degrees and or for 60 degrees, I suggest that you use this triangle. This time, I'm not going to label opposite adjacent hypotenuse because it depends on which angle you're using. Just remember, this is half of equilateral triangle of side 2. What I've drawn here, see, if you have an equilateral triangle, what happens? All angles will become 60 totally. Okay. And I'm saying all sides should be 2. If I draw an altitude there, okay, what happens is I get 60 degrees. This will be exactly half of the equilateral triangle. So I have a 30 degrees over there, right? And what is going to happen is if this complete side is 2, this side over here would be half of the complete side, which is 1. And this remaining side will be root of 2 square minus 1 square. You won't have time to do all this. Remember this as root 3 over here. So here I'm getting a triangle where for 60 degrees, for this 60 degrees, the opposite adjacent hypotenuse will be root 3, 1 and 2. Okay, root 3, 1, 2 will be the opposite adjacent hypotenuse for 60. For 30 degrees, what is the opposite adjacent hypotenuse? It will be 1 root 3, 2. If you can remember this, then you can find any ratio using this half of the triangle. So if you want tan of 30 degrees, tan 30, for tan 30 means it will be opposite by adjacent for 30, which is 1 divided by root 3. You want to find out cos of 60. Cos of 60 will be adjacent by hypotenuse for 60, which is 1 by 2. Okay. So use this method. This method is tough for you. No problem. Stick to your table. You need to memorize those values so that your time becomes faster. All right. Okay. Trigonometric identities. Sine square theta plus cos square theta is 1. This is the only one where you have 1. So I prefer remembering like this in terms of 1, 1, 1. Sec square theta minus tan square theta is 1. Cosec square theta minus cot square theta is 1. Remember, sine square, cos square. If you add these, it is 1. Sec square and tan square is a pair. Sec square minus tan square is 1. All the other variants also you please remember. Sec square is equal to 1 plus tan square theta. Cosec square theta minus cot square theta is 1. That means cosec square theta is 1 plus cot square theta. Okay. So remember all these forms of the trigonometric identities also in the questions. One important point which I want to discuss with respect to trigonometry is when you have any ratio given, suppose you are having sine theta is equal to 3 by 5 is given. Using any ratio given for a triangle, you can actually find out any other ratio. If I wanted to use this and find out what is the value of cot theta, suppose this question came. Easy. Draw a triangle. Okay. So here sine theta is equal to 3 by 5. That means that opposite side is 3, hypotenuse is 5. Now, if this is the case, what will be this missing side? Well, by the Pythagorean triplets, you already know this should be 4. 3 square plus 4 square is 5 square. Or you use Pythagoras theorem. You get this measurement as 4. Once you have this missing measurement, how you can find cot theta? Cot is adjacent by opposite. Adjacent by opposite means it will become 4 by 3. So, using a given ratio, any other ratio in that triangle for that same angle can be found. Okay, don't forget this. All right. Next, areas related to circles. Lot of questions are coming based on the basic concept of areas related to circles, which is area and perimeter of a circle. What do you call perimeter of the circle? Perimeter of the circle is called the circumference. What is area of circle formula? Pi r square, not 2 pi r square. Please don't say it is 2 pi r square. Area of circle is only pi r square. Circumference, which is the total boundary of the circle, the total perimeter of the circle is pi d or 2 pi r. Pi times diameter, because in this 2 pi r, this 2r is nothing but diameter. Okay. So remember anyone, if this is confusing, 2 pi r you can remember. 2 pi r is the circumference, area is pi r square. Next, sector, segment, all these parts of the circle you need to understand. Please go through this. You can pause the video over here, read through this, understand what is the meaning of minor sector, minor arc, major arc, chord, segment. The definitions of all this, recognizing these parts in the circle is very important. Okay. Now let's discuss the formulae. Area of sector. What's area of a sector? area of a sector will be the central angle theta by 360. This is basically the ratio into which the circle is getting divided by the sector. So sector is like I'm taking a slice out of a circle. If I was taking exact half of the circle, that sector is called what? Semicircle. Half means 180 by 360, right? If I was taking quarter of the circle, that means 90 out of 360. That means 1/4 will become the ratio. So this theta by 360 tells me what ratio is the sector of the complete circle. So if you want area of that sector, that will be that same ratio, theta by 360 into complete area of circle. What about the arc length? What is the length of this arc over here? This one, like this. This arc length, this curved portion, this circumference of the sector is given by theta by 360 into whole circumference, which is 2 pi r. Okay, theta by 360 into entire 2 pi r, you get as the arc length. So please remember this, area of sector is theta by 360 into pi r square. Arc length is theta by 360 into 2 pi r. And please remember perimeter of sector. If you are asked perimeter and if you are asked circumference, there's a difference. This arc length is same as circumference of the sector because it is the curved part. But if you're asked perimeter, what you should do to this theta by 360 into 2 pi r, which is the length of the arc, you must add this twice of the radius. Don't forget that. Okay. Now here, what do we call this yellow portion? This is the minor segment, right? This is the segment over here. Segment has a circumference which is same as the length of the arc. And the perimeter of the segment will be the circumference, which is the length of the arc, plus the length of chord. That would become the perimeter. Now, how do I find out the area of the segment? Area of segment is equal to theta by 360 into pi r square, which is area of this complete sector, minus area of triangle AOB. Okay. Now, there are two cases which I want you to take. Case 1 is when theta is equal to 60 degrees. And case 2, when theta is equal to 90 degrees. Only these two cases will come for segment, for your term 1 portions. If theta is 60 degrees, what will be the area of this triangle which you have to subtract? It's an equilateral triangle then if theta is 360. So you will just subtract root 3 by 4 into r square. Root 3 by 4 r square. That's it. It's an equilateral triangle of side r. And the area is nothing but root 3 by 4 into r square. Remember this. This is what you need to subtract if you're finding area of segment here. Complete sector minus this. If theta was 90 degrees, half base into height you use. So if theta is 90, you use half base into height. Both base and height is same, r. So in this case, the area of the triangle will be half r square. That's all. You're finding area of segment when central angle is 60, root 3 by 4, r square will be the area of the triangle. And if you're finding for theta is equal to 90 degrees, it will be half r square. Okay. All right. Last chapter, probability. 3 important discussions I want to do. Tossing a coin, rolling a dice, and picking a card. These 3 important cases we'll discuss. Probability involves more number of questions. I know that. The most important formula for probability is the basic definition of probability, which is probability of any event is number of favorable outcomes to that event. Okay, favorable outcomes divided by total outcomes, total number of outcomes. So this is one important point which I want you to remember with respect to probability. Second important point, probability of any event, minimum value is 0. Maximum value is 1. It cannot be greater than 1. It cannot be less than 0. That means it cannot be a negative integer. It cannot be an improper fraction. No, it can be a proper fraction, maximum 1, minimum 0. Okay. And probability of not E, probability of something not happening is same as 1 minus probability of that happening. So probability of you getting less than 90% in maths is 1 minus probability of you getting more than 90% in maths. Okay. That is the way you calculate. So these 3 important things are there. Now, when you're tossing a coin, suppose you're having only one toss of a coin. One toss. Okay. One toss. What are the possible outcomes? H, T. That's it. You can have H or T. If you're having 2 tosses, how many outcomes are possible? 1, 2, 3, 4. First, maybe you got H and then you got H again, this one. Or first you tossed H and then you got T. Or it could be first you tossed T, tails, and then you got heads, or tails and then tails. And 3 tosses means what are all the possible outcomes? It is listed over here. See, all these 8 outcomes you will be having. Remembering these type of outcomes is important for you to be able to answer these questions which are based out of probability. Okay, and be careful of some words. Like if suppose I'm tossing 3 coins and I'm getting these outcomes, if you're getting words like probability of getting at most 2 heads. At most 2 heads means what? Maximum 2 heads. Where do you have maximum 2 heads? Not over here. You're having here, okay. Here, okay. This is also maximum 2 heads because only 1 head is there. So it's okay. Maximum 2 heads I'm having here. This is fine. This is fine. This is fine. Even this is fine. Tail, tail, tail. Even 0 heads is okay because it still satisfies the condition that I'm having maximum only 2 heads. 0 head is also possible there. So what is the probability here? The probability for getting at most 2 heads is 7 by 8. The only case which is not considered is tail, tail, HHH, sorry. Only case which is not considered HHH with just 3 heads. Similarly, if I have the word at least means minimum. Okay, at most means maximum, at least means minimum. So be careful about this, right? Okay, rolling dice. When you are rolling dice, what are the possible outcomes? You can have 6 possible outcomes when you're rolling a single dice, right? 6 outcomes are there. The probability of getting head on one roll of a dice, single dice, the probability of getting, not head, probability of getting a prime number. That is the same as probability of getting even number, same as probability of getting odd number, all are half. Because prime numbers, you have 3 prime numbers, 2, 3, 5. Even numbers, you have 3 even numbers, 2, 4, 6. Odd numbers, 1, 3, 5. So each of these, the probability is half when you are rolling a single dice. When you roll 2 dice, all the 36 outcomes are given here. This is 36 outcomes over here. You can have 36 outcomes when you are rolling pair of dice. Now, so many types of questions can come based on this. What is the probability of getting a doublet? Doublet means what? That you're getting same number on both. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the doublet. See, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6. 6 out of 36 will become the probability. What is the probability of getting sum as 3 when you're rolling 2 dice? So sum as 3 means what? Sum as 3 means you could have these 2 cases. 2, 1, 1, 2. These are the only 2 possibilities. So 2 out of 36. Like this, different types of questions can be asked based on rolling of a dice. Next one which I wanted to discuss is picking a card type of question. When you are picking a card from a random set of playing cards, okay, you need to have a very good idea how many cards there are totally. First of all, this complete thing is called a pack of cards, right? You're having pack or deck of cards, 52 cards. There are 13 clubs, 13 diamonds, 13 hearts, 13 spades. This club is black in color. Spade is black in color. Diamond is red. Heart is red. So totally black is how much? You have 26 black and then you have 26 red. 13 cards you have in each suit. What are these 13 cards? You are having ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So how many number cards you have? You have number cards from 2 to 10. From 2 to 10 means how many number cards are there? 9 number cards. Okay, from 2 to 10. Don't say 8. Don't say 10 minus 2 equals 8. That is the number of cards. When I say from 2 to 10, 2 is also included. So you should not subtract 10 minus 2 and say there are 8 number cards. No. When I'm saying from 2 to 10, the number 2 is also included. Which means when you're counting, you should do 10 minus 1. Only 1 is not there, that number. So it will be 10 minus 1, which is 9 number cards are there. And what are these Jack, Queen, King called? These are called face cards or picture cards. So these 3 face cards are totally how many face cards do you have? You will have 3 into 4. 4 suits are there, no? So totally 12 face cards. Understanding this division of a pack of cards is very important for you to answer questions based on probability. All right? Okay. So that was a quick summary of all the concepts from all your 8 chapters, which is coming for your term 1 exam. I hope you found this useful. And if you were not clear with any one concept, you want that explained in a little more detail, put that in the comments below and I will create another video for that. Okay. So all the best to all of you. Do very well in the exam. Keep your calm. Use your reading time wisely. And I'm sure that you should all be able to do the paper well. Thank you so much. Bye.